live theatre on Broad Chair, right in the heart of Newcastle's quayside. How did it get to be here? Well, it's a long story. By the end of the Middle Ages, or to put it another way, by the beginning of the 1500s, Newcastle was a pretty rich place. It was nice and cosily protected behind some of the most impressive town walls in Europe. John Leyland, who was Henry VIII's personal historic buildings chap, said in 1541 that for strength and magnificence they far passeth all of the walls of the cities of England and most of the cities of Europe. Inside the walls, the place was awash with medieval churches, none finer than the Church of St Nicholas, which had just been given a fantastic new tower. One of the greatest church towers in Europe, with a graceful and beautiful and extraordinarily daring crown on top of it. It had literally been given in the 1470s by a chap called Robert Rhodes.
Would you like a new church tower?
He would love one, Pet.
Rhodes was the MP for Newcastle, and he was a customs official, and he was a merchant. Three pretty good ways in those days to make a lot of money. The customs bit and the merchant bit happened down here on the riverbank, because already by the early 1500s, Newcastle was the fourth most important port in England. All sorts of things went down the river from here. Wool and animal hides, grindstones, but most of all, coal. Hundreds of thousands of tons of coal poured down this river on the way to help keep London burning. And in exchange, there were barrels and timber and wine and oil and all sorts of stuff, and it came to places more or less like this. Most of the buildings that lined the riverbank and the neighbouring streets have been rebuilt over the centuries, but this one hasn't. This is pretty well what houses and businesses would have looked like in those days. It's called the Cooperage, and it used to be a barrel maker's, but nowadays it's a pub, and I find myself wondering what it's like inside. Aha! Exceedingly nice, in case you're interested. Anyway, by the early 1500s, Newcastle had gradually built a quay along the banks of the River Tyne, and it was already 541 yards long. It was the third longest quay in the country outside of London. The great high town wall lined the quay, and behind the wall and facing towards the river were the posh houses belonging to the merchants. Between the houses there were narrow openings. Lots and lots of narrow openings. And if you dived into any of these openings, what you found was a chair. Not this kind of chair, you silly person. A chair. Old Geordie word for an alleyway. There were about 20 of these chairs, with names like plumber chair and Pallister's chair, dark chair and blue anchor chair. They were very, very narrow, and to be honest, they still are. In 1505, up this chair, a group of professional gentlemen and their wives, apparently, bought a piece of land which includes the place where live theatre now stands. They were known, these 16th century chaps and chapesses, as the Guild of the Blessed Trinity, and there were sailors, masters and mariners, and of course their wives, and they bought the land so they could build a chapel and a meeting room and accommodation for old sailors or their widows. The whole complex became known as Trinity House. It's been changed time and time again over the centuries since they first built it. Until today, it's become one of the most magical, secret places in the whole of Newcastle. A network of lovely old buildings, narrow lanes, and beautiful little courtyards. I said before that the buildings have been changed loads over the centuries. But that doesn't mean that there isn't still lots of really old stuff left. This doorway, for example, is 14th century, 600 years old. So this must have been here when they bought the place in 1505. And so must this. This whole building is 600 years old as well. It used to be known as the rigging loft. Now, I'm not sure what a rigging loft was, but I suspect that it was a loft, and I'd like you to follow me very carefully here, where they kept rigging. The door and the windows are newer, but it's got gorgeous medieval stonework. And it's got a guardrobe, which is the medieval word for a toilet. It was a sort of chute where the stuff, the oo-jar you might call it if you couldn't think of a better word, came out and lay on the ground in a smelly manner. All over this complex of wonderful old buildings, there are remnants of what has gone before. Here in Live Theatre's part of the building, for example, there's old brickwork. This is really old brickwork, handmade and irregular and absolutely beautiful. Past the modern new foyer and bar with its relics of the industrial past is the oldest surviving part of Live Theatre's buildings. Through these massive strong room doors to the undercroft, you find this, which has got an ancient window set into a wall which is over 3 feet thick. And the wall itself is magnificent medieval stonework. Even the floor is medieval. There are splendid old oak beams and old oak lintels, and this is a blocked medieval doorway. Heaven knows what all this was for or where that doorway led to. But isn't it fantastic to have stuff as old as this as part of your building? But then I told you, this is a magical place. You'll have to come back and see what's happened to it since.